Hey everybody, I'm Erica with BRIX Real Estate. Thank you for joining me on iHeartMinneapolisHomes.com if you're joining me on the internet. And I am following up with an article that I recently put in my February issue of my newsletter, if that comes in the mail. And back here, can't see where I'm pointing, there was an article that I wasn't able to squeeze into the entire newsletter called 9 Ways to help you compete as a homeowner or a home buyer in an all cash world right now. And in Minnesota, to be honest, we're not necessarily seeing like every offer coming in as cash. We're still seeing a lot of financing. I think the information that I'm borrowing from is from more of a national level. So I'm going to try to make it more of that Minnesota level. So if you're joining me outside of this area, thank you. But I am going to just be specifically talking about what I see in the Western Metro of Minneapolis. And so without repeating myself too much, the first number one, because there was 9 suggestions here, some of them will go over faster and slower depending on what it is. And again, this is in the article. It's just talking about you have to have a pre-approval letter, and I mean past a pre-qualification letter. So depending on the age of the person I'm talking to, I think this is the step a lot of people want to skip. They just want to go to house shopping, but we have no idea what your budget is. We don't know your loan. But going further than that, I need it fully underwritten to be a strong pre-approval letter. So pre-approval letters are not like a one size fits all. Some of these letters like mean absolutely nothing. It just depends on how far you've gotten in the process to make it worth anything to anybody else. So a pre-qualification letter, the way I explain it is just like you've picked up the phone and someone's listened to what you've said and generally is just like, okay, you sound like you'd be ready to buy a house. That is definitely not enough. We need a pre-approval letter, and we need it fully underwritten so that we're ready to go and we don't have much standing in the way from you getting the financing that you need. And so if you were reading, this is talking about like the old day versus the news day. So it definitely depends on how old you are and your experience with home buying. Some of this might be resonating with you. If you've never bought a house before, you're not going to obviously remember the old days. And frankly, I don't either, because, I've only been around for so long to know what the quote unquote old days are like. All right, so tip number 2 is also about money or financing, but this time I'm talking to my people who have cash. And I also see sort of this attitude that it's like, hey, I have cash, so I don't need to do anything. Unfortunately, your word is not going to be enough when purchasing a $200,000 plus property. Remember, this is the most expensive thing you'll probably own or purchase in your life. And so we need proof that you're good for it, even if you are good for it. So for example, a screenshot is probably not going to cut it. Now it can. There's always exceptions to rules. It all depends on where the cash is. We want to create a document, which we should be able to get, or your financial like your banker or whatnot should be able to pull something together on proper letterhead for us if we ask nicely. So when we have proof of funds, this is some sort of documentation showing the money is sitting in an account somewhere and is accessible liquid. So if you are planning on liquidating like a 401k or something of that nature, we need to move it over so that we can actually liquidate it and show people that we're serious. It can't be like hung up somewhere where it's going to take a long time for us to get to it. So a perfect example is sometimes people tell me they have cash because they have a house to sell. Homes are not liquid assets. It's going to take some time to sell a house, even in a hot market. So we need to get the house on the market. That's not even like a great example, but it is something that I've heard from people before. So stay away from screenshots. Think about, if you're going to pay with cash, how are we going to show people you have cash? A lot of times I give this more thought than is necessary. When we go to write the offer, people are often just going to ask questions, and sometimes, the word is good enough, but you definitely don't want to bank on that. And definitely depends on the price point too, right? If we're talking over $1 million, that might be a different requirement than someone who's buying a $180,000 house for cash. it does come down to the personality of the seller and the listing agent on what they're willing to accept or not. I'm just preparing you in advance. Work on getting something pulled together, proving you actually have the cash. Because we don't just show up with a bag of money on closing day. And by the way, there still are closing costs, even if you don't have a lender involved. All right, tip number 3, buyer's letters or buyer's love letters are going out of fashion. It doesn't mean you can't write one. In Minnesota, it's still legal to do that, but not all sellers are accepting them. And a lot of listing agents have become keen on the fact that they're not particularly honoring fair housing when we're exposing a lot about ourselves as the home shopper. So there's other ways for us to not get around it, but there's other ways for us to prove our worth other than just numbers on a purchase agreement. So for example, and I'm going to talk a lot about your lender today because they're so critical to this process. It's always shocking to me how low people will put this on their priority list because they want to go out shopping so badly. But your lender needs to be willing to pick up the phone and vouch for your buying power. A willingness to pick up the phone on a Saturday night when you're sending in an offer and vouching for your credibility as a borrower of a significant amount of money cannot be understated. Now that I've been doing this for a while, I am not going to personally pick a lender who's not available on the weekends, that comes with a 1-800 number and I don't know how I'm going to get a hold of. I want a personal connection. I want to know somebody that's hustling behind that line and has some skin in the game and is going to do what they can to help me. So the real estate agent's important, right? Because they're helping you write the offer. They're looking at the houses with you and helping you make that best decision on the house. Your lender is just as critical. If they're not available and they're not going to give you a pre-approval letter for 3 days and they're waiting for the address and you're waiting for them, you're going to miss out on those homes. The only way that's going to work for you is in a slower market. So when we're in kind of these speedy, multiple offers, things are moving really quickly, we need a lending partner that is going to pick up the phone and work alongside us. Plus, sometimes I need them to run numbers. If you're on like a tight budget and we're kind of on the bubble of what we don't know if we can afford, I don't want to write an offer on a house that you cannot financially handle. I need somebody running numbers on the other side. Creating that relationship between your agent and your lender is necessary. It's not your responsibility. Don't get me wrong. Your responsibility is to figure out which lender partner you want. Again, we're looking for somebody reliable and local. The local part is important because then they actually understand the market. They're writing pre-approval letters every single day so they can see what is winning in multiple offers and what is not. And a really good lender might even throw out ideas for what it's going to take to win that house. There's also like an appraisal piece of this, and we need to consider that. So when we're trying to brainstorm how we're going to win in multiple offers, the lender becomes a part of the team, and we're working together to figure out how we're going to win in these situations. So it's not just falling on the real estate agent who may or may not know all the components of what you're doing on the lending piece. So we create a team once we know who each other are. And that's hard when the client isn't making those decisions or isn't sure who to use. So let's jump into contingencies. And, when we get into these intense markets, it's really challenging because emotions are high. And so we have to make good decisions before we go into it. Just briefly talking about this, the most common contingency to decide on is whether you're getting an inspection or not. I'm always going to advise for you to get one, but I also am going to be very honest and tell you that when we're in a really hot market, people are skipping inspections just to get the deal done. Is that going to come with a consequence? It could. There's definitely, you are rolling the dice that you do not have a very expensive problem you're going to have to fix because you're relying on the disclosure. Or maybe you're relying on like a city inspection, which isn't nearly what it would be if you got your own private inspection. Moving past that, another thing for you to think about is an appraisal waiver, probably called different things around the country. So this is where you say, I will pony up some cash if the house doesn't appraise. When we get into these situations where people are going tens of thousands of dollars over the asking price, assuming it was already at market value, the risk of the house appraising goes up and up. And so then that, of course, makes listing agents uncomfortable because they think, oh, we're going to be renegotiating, dropping the price. So my seller's not really getting the price we thought. Maybe we could have gone with somebody else. So if you are getting a home loan, there's always going to be that appraisal piece later down, which doesn't come for a while. So of course we don't know what it's going to appraise for a few weeks before we get that answer. And so if you tell the seller up front, hey, I will cover X amount of dollars if it doesn't appraise, is going to make your offer stronger than somebody who doesn't offer this. And a lot of times in multiple offer situations, when I'm the buyer's agent, the listing agent will pick up the phone and ask me, will my buyer cover X amount? And if they will, how much would it be? That is not something everybody can do. You must have the cash in your account. So one other trick I had up my sleeve last spring when things were so crazy is I would have my clients give a proof of funds and a pre-approval letter. Now they were mostly financing, but if the appraisal didn't come back at or above, then they were willing to give that cash. And instead of just saying they had the cash, we actually proved they had the cash in the account. So if there were issues, they would pay the difference up to a certain amount of money. So it doesn't have to be an unlimited appraisal. I've also seen unlimited appraisals. I've had sellers ask for whatever it doesn't appraise for, you will pay the difference and that you won't cancel the contract. So of course, everybody really needs to know their numbers to be comfortable with that. Obviously a huge risk for the buyer. Depending on the situation, there are people that might be able to agree to that or want to agree to that just to get the house under contract. All of these things make us uncomfortable, right? The more we give up in terms of contingencies, the less ability we have to back out of the contract if it doesn't work for us as buyers. So when your real estate agent is asking you questions about contingencies, make sure you're listening. You're thinking about the pros and cons of all these things, because at the end of the day, it's just a house and there will always be another. I'm going to take a break right there because I have been talking a lot and quickly. I'm going to do a part 2 because there's still so much more to say about this topic. I hope you'll join me when I have that uploaded as well. I'm going to talk about the importance of an escalatory addendum or an escalation clause, ways that you can offer the seller more added bonus by adding like a post-closing occupancy. We'll talk about cashback offer programs and well-written offers and relationships that come into real estate that do affect you as the buyer. So I will hope you will join me for part 2. Thanks.